All right, we're going.
Super.
Hey, this is Ian, and you're watching the Soulful Man Show. And I want to introduce to you someone who's with us here today. And before I do that, I want to talk about why I created this show. I did create this show to speak about topics that are really important for me, and I feel for others. Um, and to create a dialogue with people out there doing good work in the world, and get the different perspectives on these topics. So the topic for this speaker series is tapping into, or rather tuning into, our desire and accessing our power, the relationship between desire, what we want, and our power. I just wanted to say this one thing, because I was reflecting today on like what desire feels like to me. Desire feels like to me to be kind of like a bit of it's like a spectrum of our need, because we need to be in, we need to exist. We need to exist in this world. We need life. We need food. We need sex to procreate. We need sustenance, and all in all different forms. And it's basic. And then the way that each one of us, the way the colors and the textures for what we need is is different for each one of us. And how do we even know what that is? How do we know what we like? How do we know what food we like and what we don't like? We kind of have to pay attention to that. We got to sort of take inventory, have like inward eyes, and know what our desire is. So I just wanted to speak a little bit about that, and enough about that and about me. I just would like to introduce to you Eivind. And Eivind runs Reclaim Your Inner Throne. This is a training program for men that has been authored by Eivind's own life quest to find a new model archetype for the modern man, as well as his counterpart. So I want to welcome you, Eivind, and yeah, how you doing?
Great. Thank you for the welcome. Yeah, let's dive in. I'm ready for this.
Awesome. Yeah, Eivind, we were talking a little bit before we started recording this session, just about what desire means, for Eivind. And I guess I just kind of would like to start by knowing a little bit about where you're at with your work in your life today.
Okay, so the question is, how is my work going, or is it
where are you
something
at with?
about my desire? Yeah. Well, I love what I do. I feel blessed. It's an incredible privilege to be able to do what I do and do it for a living. I have been struck, as I'm sure many were, by this Gallup poll that was done internationally not very long ago, where they discovered that I think 87% of everyone working in the world does not really enjoy their job, like almost 9 out of 10. And to know that that's a reality in the world, and to know the level of enjoyment and passion and meaning and just gratitude that my work days are filled with, that's incredible. And to see also the level of impact that it has on the men, and to know that what I do has ripple effects in the world and is changing lives, not just in the first chain, but in the second link of the chain, and the third. What I'm doing.
We froze up for a second over there, but I think we caught most of that. It's a big inspiration for me. Are you able to hear me still, Eivind?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a big inspiration for me to hear. I personally am not quite as far along, I'll call it my soul's path, as you are. And I'm really interested to hear from you, as you're totally juiced, and that's like obvious. Like what, you know, and you know, you could speak about where you started or wherever, pick it up wherever you want to. Like what got you here? Like what got you to this point? How'd you get to this point where you're like now in the you're the master of your you're the master really of your domain. If you're doing what you want, you're the master of your domain. What got you to this point?
Mm. Yeah, master, I don't know, but certainly quite a long, quite some distance along the way of a life of meaning. That's for sure. I think I started in the way that it typically starts with suffering. I don't really know that, and I don't really know anyone who's doing anything meaningful with their lives that didn't have to endure deep suffering in order to get there.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that God, whatever he or she is, chose to design this realm in that way, but it just seems to be how we're wired, that in order to really come to terms with who we are at a deeper level, we need to be stripped bare of our hubris and all of our superficial, conditioned, egoic desires and all of that stuff. And I sometimes joke that I had my 40-year crisis when I was 20.
You were what?
That I had my 40-year crisis, you know, this idea that you're 40, you know, and you've sort of done everything. You have your career, you have your kids, and basically everything that you were supposed to achieve with your life has been done, and you're still no better or no happier for it.
Right.
I don't have kids, so I don't know how that's going to impact me. I probably will have kids one day, but I don't have them yet. But, you know, I had that crisis of meaning and identity very early on, beginning of my 20s. And I really was in quite a terrible place, even though people looking at me didn't know that. I was very much suffering in secrecy. And I think that's really the cross that most of us men bear. We are struggling a lot, like fucking hell. And we don't want anyone to know about it. Because, you know, that's what it means to be a man. You know, you just grit your teeth and you fucking get on with it. And this is some sort of remnant of some sort of an ancient masculine ideal that even the more sensitive 21st century guys still seem to cling to. And I certainly did. I was basically falling apart at the seams. I was afraid I was losing my mind. I was depressed, sometimes considering why I was even here. Maybe it would be better to just end it all. And in the middle of that, realizing that I couldn't really live this way, I discovered spirituality. At the time, that seemed like the answer. I was, I suppose, around 22 or 23 at the time when I started meditating. In the middle of a deep life crisis, I discovered Buddhism. I became an astronaut, a cosmonaut, you know, diving deep into the nature of consciousness and the nature of reality. And I accumulated thousands of hours of meditation experience, being able to navigate the flavors of my consciousness with ease, with time.
Right.
But then it took a woman in Bodh Gaya, India, on a pilgrimage that I was on at 28 years old. I had not come anywhere to terms with my sexuality or my relationship to women because I was living a bit of a monkish, like, celibate. I basically hadn't had a girlfriend. I basically hadn't had a fully consummated sexual experience at 28. So I was very much a late bloomer.
Right.
For whatever reason, inheriting a masculine lineage with tremendous difficulty around this area of intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
I later learned that my dad as well thought that he was going to go crazy because he was tormented by exactly the same things. And so then I understood that this was a lineage pattern.
Right.
Then this woman who I fell in love with in my strange way over that week. She just walked out of my life, and I literally saw her back, and I was there to say goodbye, and I want to stay in touch. And the travel party was about to leave Bulgaria, and so I wouldn't see her again unless I basically shouted out. She was walking with some other guy, and I didn't, because I was so damn afraid of women, and I was so damned afraid of rejection, and I hadn't allowed that to be true for me until that very moment, when a woman that I liked walked out of my life and I couldn't shout her name. And that's when my life really changed again. And I had my second huge turmoil around identity. I meditated and prayed in all kinds of temples about, basically a very counterintuitive content for a pilgrimage in India. And I was just like, help me master the domains of sexuality and social dynamics, And so I went back home. I stopped meditating. I stopped reading Buddhist literature, and I went fully into pursuing intimacy, sexuality, social dynamics, and so on and so forth.
Good for you.
Which led to me having my first girlfriend and having a sex life, shortly after. So finally I had that. And, in that process, this is the funny part. It was in that process of realizing that, okay, this was maybe what I'd wanted all along, to just have a rich sex life and having love and intimacy. I wasn't actually so interested in, enlightenment. That was just my bypass. I realized in that moment that actually what had happened, and that nobody ever told me, was that I didn't have a clear idea of what it meant to be a man. Nobody had told me anything about what it meant to be masculine. Nobody had told me what it meant to be relating to women. Nobody had told me anything of value about sex. Nobody had given me any mentoring whatsoever. That was actually the kind of mentoring that I needed to live a life that felt meaningful to me. Mm-hmm. And that's when I understood, like, fuck, man, I'm, in a way, I mean, I'm not blaming anyone, but that's a pretty shitty education that I received. Nobody in school or elders in my life, friends, nobody had given me these things. And so I realized, okay, am I the only one here? Am I the only one that really struggled with these things? And then I realized I need to find out. And so I started pursuing a masculine identity. And I started writing about movies on a website called Masculinity Movies, where I was writing about masculinity in movies. And as I did that, something quite shocking happened. I realized that pretty much everybody had this problem.
This crisis, this identity crisis, as a man.
As a man. Mm-hmm. That men of all ages, as I was writing from a place of my own confusion, all of a sudden I turned into a leader, because I was the guy that was honest enough with myself to feel like a complete fuck up.
Right. To ask the tough questions and to go into these dark places.
Yeah. And that was when I was about 29 or 30 years old, when I started taking an active interest in this. And 1 or 2 years later, I discovered the King, Warrior, Magician, Lover system of archetypes. I think I discovered them in 2008 by the late Robert Moore and his colleague, who's still alive, Douglas Gillette. They had discovered this beautiful map of the masculine psyche based on Jungian theory. They're neo-Jungians. And that everything just started coming full circle, because when I was little, before I had my crisis, I was so invested in fairy tales and mythology, and all of a sudden, this spiritual bypass that I've been on in my 20s, all of a sudden I could take spirituality into a really earthy, very immanent, incarnate place that didn't involve me having to fly up here where there no path and purpose in this world. And for the last decade, I've been relentless. I've just been going 24/7.
Awesome. I want to, okay. So what I heard is that I guess in your own sort of earlier spiritual pursuits, where you were able to establish some level of control or mastery over, over the faculties, to be able to guide at least to guide your awareness and your experience. And interpersonally, what you found was a very strong lack of identity.
Yes.
When you came into relationship, your first, sounds like, powerful relationship with a woman, and then in sort of discovering these kind of, and I know a little bit about them. I've not read extensively on them, but I was involved in a men's group a few years back that used these archetypes to sort of establish the grounds and the sort of the session, how to sort of move through the session with these different archetype, energies, to be able to access different parts of ourselves and group. And I loved it.
Yeah.
I did love it. And so you went on this pursuit, or it seems you've been smitten. Okay. So you fell in love. I'm going to call it what I feel. And, for myself, you fell in love with some aspect of this that allowed you to feel yourself, to discover parts of yourself that you
Absolutely.
had an idea about, but really had no idea about. Could you talk about that? Like what was it really like? Because it's obvious in speaking to you, you're grounded in this. It's meaningful. You derive, as you speak, you're deriving your meaning, and your presence kind of grows from this place. So what was the embodiment of this as you moved into this kind of practice? Where did it kind of begin?
It began when I was a child. I don't exactly know when. Maybe I was born with the seed of this, who knows? But I do know that stories were really important to me from an early age. And I remember having tapes from this Norwegian storyteller where he was reading Norwegian folk tales. And I would play that tape until it practically, broke. That was when we still had analog technology and these cassettes, and I would play them and I would read fairy tales. And I also had this book of fairy tales from the whole world with these beautiful images and stuff. And I read it so much that it just basically fell apart. And I also remember, reading Tolkien when I was probably, 13, 14 years old, and heading into the universe of Middle Earth and Lord of the Rings, and being with the fellowship in the Mines of Moria this morning when I was supposed to go to school, and they were just about to face off with this ancient evil, the Balrog, and I remember there's just no way I'm going to school today. So so basically what I did was just like, Mommy and Daddy, I'm ill. I can't go. I have a fever. And then I just took a thermometer. That's when they still, stuck them up the ass, So it was easy because you could just put the end of the thermometer against a light bulb and all of a sudden you had a fever. And so I just gave myself a fever, and then that meant I could immerse myself in the Lord of the Rings for a full day. So, this was, I guess I had a fever for this kind of stuff, I had a passion for it. And so when I lost myself into addiction and computer games in my late teens and 20s, the place that I would still default to was places of story and fantasy. And so I would play role-playing games on my computer and just completely get, immersed in these worlds. So it was always there, this story. And I've come to, realize that story really is the lens through which we view reality. We view everything through the lens of the story. And so I think if I'm going to go all the way to the bottom of it, it's my love for stories and my gradual increase in understanding for the importance of the central narrative of my life that I'm telling myself internally and externally, realizing how important that is where it all began. And that was a gradual process. But I think in terms of, you actually asked about the embodiment, so I'm going to go into something very somatic, because the way I see my life up until this point is three layers of initiation. In my work, I work with the three worlds of all cosmological systems known around the world. Really, it's the upper world, it's the middle world, and it's the lower world. And so I've had a sort of a reverse initiation where I started out in spirituality, as I've told you, because of a life crisis. So I meditated and I explored consciousness and metacognition, going out, exploring everything from a witness consciousness, that kind of a thing. Totally an upper world experience. That's where I started. Not much embodiment there, Ian. But then I realized with that woman in India in 2007, I think it was 2006, 2007, that, okay, time to really start mastering the normal world more. And so I was initiated into the middle world, the practical, talking to people, getting my shit together, being in relationships, having sex and all that stuff. But then finally at around, it was in the summer of 2012, the thing happened that would completely come to shape what I do today. Is I felt ill. And I think that's where the embodiment that you're talking about came in. Maybe because I'd worked too hard, maybe because I was stubborn, maybe because I didn't listen to myself. For whatever reason, I got mononucleosis, which is a viral disease from the Epstein-Barr virus, and has very different, what's it called? I don't remember the word for it in English, but the way that the illness sort of develops. Basically I ended up having chronic fatigue and being weaker and weaker for the next 5 years.
Whoa. Okay. I had mononucleosis also when I was young. I think the word maybe is pathology. Okay. Yeah. So that, I don't, I guess I'll start by reflecting back that the fables and stories and the legends, like I feel, that speak of, like, I feel they're expansions, like they're like the ways of sort of expanding upon, especially these days, a very limited existence. And these stories, the archetypal stories, the structures kind of give us far more perspective of seeing, what is really happening in the world and what is really happening in ourselves.
Yeah.
I feel that you have a natural romance for that, as many of us, do, who are seeking depth and richness, so that you can feel more of what there really is inside, by seeing the world through a different lens, or through a richer and much more profound, developed landscape.
Yeah, you got to do that. You got to allow the lens that you have from your current sense of self to be shattered, so as to die and be reborn into a being, an identity, a man. I mean, this is the very central topic of initiation. It's death and rebirth. This is, classically speaking, in tribal cultures, the very means by which you become a man. You die and you're reborn. And if you don't do that, you will remain a boy for the rest of your earthly days. And so if you don't do that, whether it be through illness or some other, ideally through a conscious ritual practice or a facilitated process, you will simply not find the true nature of your being in this lifetime. It's not going to happen.
So we're at the, yeah, absolutely. And we're at the death stage of your story. And I guess after this, you've spoken with what resonated with you, the point that you were at when you discovered that, you're not, this idea of yourself as a man is unstable. And then sometime after this, you got sick.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did.
And you got mononucleosis, and then you developed chronic fatigue syndrome for 5 years. And so could you speak about your, because I think you've deconstructed, you've kind of in a way deconstructed this idea that, which is the theme, which is our desire. In some way, you had an inverse relationship with your own desire in some way. It sounds to me, which is thematic, not just for men in general, but certainly we're discussing men here.
What do you mean when you say an inverse relationship to my desire, Ian?
Well, I mean, if we're not giving ourselves what our life force demands of us, is again, like speaking about, I'm reflecting on demands. I'm writing something right now that speaks about, existence, like the demands, like our life force demands existence. It absolutely does. Now,
yes.
The particular way in which we can nourish that demand for existence is specific to each one of us. I cannot be nourished by your requirements. You cannot be nourished by mine. So in that way, no one, that's like the tragedy in a way of being a man or being a human being, that there is no one person, anyone can model anything for us so perfectly that we know our way. We must find our own way. And if we're, one of the manifestations of that, or one of the expressions of our life force demanding what it wants, is to get sick. There is an inverse relationship. It's still on the pathway to discovering what's needed. But, along that pathway is illness.
I get it now. Thank you. Yeah. And you just lit up when you spoke about this. I think you're close to your passion here.
What's that?
You just lit up when you spoke about this. Your energy just got so much more animated. It seemed like this is very close to what you care about.
Oh my God, this is on every forefront of everything that I'm involved in my life right now. Like,
right.
And in creating new life, I'm creating new life. I'm trying to create a child I have created a child. There's an embryo sitting in a laboratory right now.
Wow.
2 embryos. One is strong and the other one we're not sure about. So just calling in life. We're not sitting by idly waiting if it going to or not. Everything in our life has been a calling in of existence. And this life is no different from that. So yeah, I'm kind of fully in this topic.
That's cool. Yeah, I could tell. I'm glad. And this is where I think that we can really get down to the core of the matter, which you start out with, this desire and power, because I think that's a very very potent polarity in a way. I mean, the way that it constellates in our life is often as a polarity. And the power being the warrior archetype and the desire being the lover archetype. And most of us, we struggle with dancing with these internally and externally. And it seems to me like, given that we're growing up in a culture that, okay, so it's succeeded on many levels. We have affluence and comforts unlike anyone has ever had in the history of humanity. So that's great. But in terms of being given a pathway to really fully individuating and becoming ourselves truly, we are quite impoverished. So we're running around as half-lives, like human robots that are given scripts about success and happiness, and the vast majority die having not even had a smidgen of an idea of who they could possibly be. Yeah. And so, this is the context in which the conversation around desire is typically happening. And so when we talk about desire, most of the time, we're talking about addiction and people running away from themselves. And so this is why I'm thinking it's really important to bring in this story around the underworld and death and rebirth, because it's when I'm being humbled so fully that my identity structure literally crumbles before my very eyes, and I'm reanimated by whatever forces come into my life in order to make that happen. Mm-hmm. That is the point at which I become a crucible, a vessel that can receive the life and give expression to a desire that comes from a truthful place. So now, having been killed by life essentially, and coming back to sing my song in the second act, that's when my true desire can really start And you know, a lot of people experience success in life, and then they realize it was completely hollow, and then maybe they stop, and maybe they drop their relationship or their business or whatever it is, and then they're just like they free fall through life until they sort of basically are reanimated and become someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the point at which we can really start talking about desire, I believe.
Love it. I love that. It's like, because I picture within your story, and I don't know anything about your story other than what you've just shared, but that, like, you know, illness
Yeah.
in a way is kind of life saying, let go, like, let go
Yes.
of it, let go. And like, until you finally do let go of whatever it is that you're harboring, holding on to, that's to your detriment. If
Yes.
you're doing it, it's making you ill. And then when it finally does slip from your hands and you die that death.
Yes.
Within that is an opportunity to learn what is really, what is there that is needed, that could be different or nurturing. So for you, going through that, like, okay, maybe that's an opportunity to fall right back into some other level of illusion. How was that not the case for you? How was that not?
That's a good question. I like that. How is it that I went through the illness and didn't just return right back to the same old?
Yeah.
Well,
and we don't know what you did yet, but just to speak of that, and I'm sure that's part of the work that you are teaching. It must be.
it is. I mean, Reclaim Your Inner Throne is the 3-month, and we have different offerings now, but the Reclaim Your Inner Throne 3-month journey, the initiation for men that we host online, it's in a way a blueprint of what I experienced in my life, packaged into a certain way so that men all around the world can experience it in a conscious way without having to fall ill or go bankrupt or lose their kids or their wives or whatever. Mm. So yeah, I don't know if I can answer your question. Why is it that I didn't fall back? Maybe I was lucky. Maybe I was touched by grace. I don't know. Mm. But I think it couldn't have happened if it weren't for a handful of people that entered my life at some very essential moments in time. So I suppose share that story. It will take a while though, but this is a story about my shift in my relationship to women, and by being on this path of humbling and increased level of soul in my life, I somehow opened to receiving what I can only label a kind of oracle quality from women in my life. And it was something that didn't make any sense to me at the time. But it was as if like 4 or 5 women in my life had just sort of gathered in a room and sort of planned how they would be able to get me to crack open into the next part of my life. But none of these had ever met each other. They just, my current partner, or I'm entering a relationship right now, and she talks about how the universe likes to rhyme. And there was a lot of women that rhymed in a very particularly strong way over the course of a couple of years. And through that process, my soul just burst into the world in a whole new way. And it was in that process that Reclaim Your Inner Throne was born. So Reclaim Your Inner Throne, the initiation, was born while I was in the middle of my illness, and I started facilitating the process while still experiencing chronic fatigue. Mm-hmm. And so it became sort of a vessel of, and a limitation.
There just, I think we just broke off there for about 6 seconds. It became a vessel of
my own healing.
Okay.
reclaiming a throne. And I think it was my capacity and the blessing for whatever reason that I managed to make meaning out of my predicament. I think that was my salvation in a way. So that I wouldn't have been the same guy today if I didn't do that. That's for sure.
I've never heard. I think what you are speaking about when you talk about the universe. I don't know exactly how you phrase this, but the universe
likes to rhyme.
Likes to rhyme. I think that's a reflection of patterns.
Mm-hmm.
That's a beautiful way of putting that, but
yeah, it's not my words.
Yeah, okay. No, but I like that. It's
yeah.
And so through being able to see the patterns or the rhythms in your, I guess, in your own trajectory and relationships, you were able to learn something about yourself.
I learned a lot of things about myself, and I've always been a stubborn and willful, and I've been a stubborn guy, and you won't get me to budge once I've arrived at a strong, firm stance. These days, of course, I'm much more flexible, but the level of bullheadedness that I had, even though I didn't necessarily feel fully empowered, but when it came to taking a stand for things, I've always been like a fucking, warrior. I'm not going to budge until you give me a good reason. You give me a better version of what I'm putting forth, and I'll move towards you. But I'm pretty happy with where I am right now until you give me that reason. And so I think that has been a blessing and a curse for me. And it was thanks to the illness and all of these strange cosmic, convergence of women speaking in strange ways that I was able to yield and start listening to the message that life wanted to offer me.
I love that. Yes, I have read a lot, or I've actually not read a lot, but I've read a little bit, and with a lot of content, to the little bit that I have read on the idea that a woman's soul brings a man's soul towards a meaningful existence, some level of just what is in the femininity, allows the otherwise consolidating energy patterns of males to expand, in this world, and to feel what is consolidated inside of us.
Yeah.
And brings out like demands, actually. It demands that we name what we desire. There's, some, I feel, and within my own experience, some aspect of what is in the feminine demands that we as men name what it is we desire, and specifically from and for them, and life for and from them.
So women are in a way demanding that we become clear on what we want. So what you say?
It's like that they know that we do.
They intuitively connect us with our deeper desire or knowing. Is that the message? Because I think that would be right.
Yes, within the relationship, it is, kind of like the energy moves like from us towards them, and into life. That is the trajectory, and just in terms of our penetrating energy, it does, in seed form, it asks, it's unconscious, mostly, but it asks to come from us, for us to show it to name it, to get out of our own way, and to say what we want with the force that is there, and to allow it to come forward. I'm just reflecting a little bit on what you said, and just from my own experience also, how you've been pulled into an understanding of, I suppose, who you are and now what you want, and not knowing anything about relationships, but it must be there also, because of some aspect of this, the dynamic between men and women, female.
Well, certainly these women have had a strong impact on me and my rigidity and stubborn ways. And I think if there's one thing that mythology and sort of the symbols of various cultures around the world have always suggested, is that women are closer to the unconscious nature and the unknown than men are. And then men are more the guardians of the known world and the structures and the builders of civilization. And in that way, you could say that men are more connected, traditionally speaking, with the warrior archetype, and women more with the lover archetype. And so basically, when a man is stubborn or is very rigid in his ways, he's very patterned, and there's no way for him to get out of the pattern. He is holding on to a form, and the feminine is the thing that goes beyond forms, you know, and it breaks down, and maybe it overflows the riverbanks or whatever. And so typically, I think that for a guy that really has that challenge, that like I was one of those guys, that I was a stubborn motherfucker, you know, I really was. And on some levels I still am, but I'm way more flexible. That women in their feminine nature, connected close to the unconscious way, and as I say that, I think of the priestess archetype. You know, there are women that are in a way ritual space keepers. They will typically be very powerful facilitators of a shift for us as men.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the time what we'll find is that women will show up in our lives as priestesses in order to help us shift into a new incarnation or a new identity structure. But you will also find often that the women that had that effect, that priestess role, they will not stay. They will not be the woman that you marry. It will not be the woman that you have kids with, because their role was to be some sort of a psychopomp, you know, some sort of initiating force into the next level. And so after maybe being faced with so and so many priestess women, a man can finally find his queen, you know. And so this is the journey that we go on, that priestesses just break us apart until we are whole enough to meet our queen.
That's a beautiful way of putting that. I think that story would be very triggering to my partner. And I feel that within a certain truth of that is also a level of unknown, kind of like a symbiotic way of growing and developing. There is that which the priestess can grow from as well. What that, let's say, necessarily is, or what the priestess is holding on to as priestess, and what the priestess perhaps wants or needs in some way to develop into something else, is maybe a story for women to tell, and not for men. But that absolutely does resonate with me, and that's beautiful.
I think also a woman can find the queen inside of her when she's been identified as a priestess for a long time, and that as a man we can have that effect on a woman. Mm-hmm. That she's been loving, because these priestess women typically are very soulful, and they love ritual space, and they're healers, and sometimes they tend to be not fully in life in some way. They have been alienated by fully belonging to this world in some way, so they're living in almost the in-between space. And I believe that one of the things that we can do as men, we can, through our masculine love, we can invite women to fully come into the world, and as we do that, they will invite us to fully come into the world. And I think that's a beautiful opportunity.
Yeah. Sorry, we're breaking up a little bit again here. Are you able to hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm here. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it speaks of the role of men as space holders. I think also in the trauma that surrounds, much of the patterning in the feminine struggle, and
Oh, for sure.
yeah, and that again is a whole other and beautiful topic, and maybe a topic for the next series. Well, I think we've been going for about 45 minutes, so I'm just going to be mindful of the fact that firstly. I think that you and I could probably go on for quite some time, just even
Sure.
about this small topic and a subtopic and part of your journey, which I do have more questions about. And I guess at this point, just in terms of like summary, so I'd like to know, because there's your transition, and I think really it's the story, your personal story speaks of your work, and so we can learn a little bit more about your work. Just by understanding how you transitioned into your work, and maybe we don't have enough time to cover that in its fullness. But at this point now, you're in your inspiration. I came, we got on this call, and you're totally juiced. You're creating this. You've got this seminar going on next week. And you're totally juiced by it, and you're in your inspiration. So at this point in your journey, what keeps you there? What keeps you in your inspiration and at your edge?
Mm.
Or what is going on now that is sort of drawing you in even deeper into what you're doing?
It's very interesting that you say this now, because the question makes me realize that I'm in such a flow with life and work right now that I virtually don't have to try anymore. Like it's like I don't really need to think much about my habits and all of that stuff. It's because I know where I'm going, so everything is just falling into place around where I'm going. And so I think ultimately this is what it's all about for us guys. Unless we know where we're going, then whatever we do is just, pissing in the wind, it's just, we're throwing paint at a canvas, hoping it turns into art. And, but we don't know what we're doing. And so no matter how much we meditate and do martial arts and dance and journal and stuff, if we don't know why we're doing it, it's very hard for that to magically turn into something. So I just know why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I know what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And so everything is just falling into place around that. Of course there are habits. I wake up in the morning and I meditate. I study. I do diets, and or I try to take care of my diet. And I work out and stuff like that. All of that is important. Right. And I think when you don't have your life together, you need to start with those things, because in a way they create a context or a foundation for you to fall into purpose more easily.
Yeah.
But by the time the purpose is there and you're juiced, then all of that stuff will just almost happen by itself, because
you don't need much help anymore.
Yeah, because beautiful people are coming into life. There's love, there's passionate sex, there's purpose, money is starting to come, service. Things are getting pretty good, and all of that is just as a reflection of keep fucking showing up.
Yeah.
Don't be a coward. Like, be brave. Show up. Know what you stand for. Find clarity about what you're doing, where you're going. Have the right connections. Find people who can not only facilitate your process, but people for whom you can facilitate their process, so that it's a mutual give and take. Mm-hmm. Don't be greedy and use people as transactional, support wheels for your life fulfillment project. So it needs to be show up, serve, love, speak, sing, life will be good.
You could put a period after that or an exclamation mark.
Yeah.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that, Eivind. Okay. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up with that. I've loved talking to you today. I really, appreciate.
Thank you.
And honor
appreciate
your journey and your story, and thank you for sharing it, with me and with us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been really juicy and enjoyable. And you've got a gift for everybody that's watching here today, and there is a button on this page that everybody can click in order to access this gift, and maybe you can just tell us what that.
You want me to share what it is?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So basically, this is when you asked me what I would like to share with your people, I wanted to give them the Where Peasants Become Kings book that I've written. It's been something that I've been giving away as a freebie on the website for a while, and now I've expanded on the book and I'm starting to charge a little bit for it. But your guys will get it for free as being part of this. So it's a 3-part book, little book, 40 plus pages long, where the guys will get an introduction to the Reclaiming Your Throne body of work, where it came from, the sort of challenges that I had to endure to get there. And then they will get, as part 2, there's a really popular document or segment of the book on the archetypes. This is probably, among everything that I've ever done, this is probably the most downloaded and most loved. It's just a 12 pages, really concise introduction to the archetypes.
Right.
And then finally, there's the 3rd part is on what I call the individuation matrix, which basically is sort of a particular way of working with, or like a particular way of conceptualizing these archetypes that is incredibly practical and is unique, uniquely my conception. So you won't find this from Robert Moore's work or whatever, but I'm finding this to be an incredibly powerful way of working with the archetypes in your life. And this is the part that is that you will get as well as part of this Soulful Man summit or symposium or whatever you call it. And so that will be a way for you to really embody the teaching in your life.
Beautiful.
So good luck with that.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna indulge in that also. My partner Julie and I like to we like to read to each other, things of various topics of inspiration. So it sounds kind of like just the right size to share that with each other.
Cool.
So I look forward to indulging in it also. Eivind, thank you. Thanks so much for being here today, and sharing, and good luck next week with your gig that's going on. And I hope to be able to show up for that.
Kings of the North.
What's that?
Kings of the North.
Yeah, Kings of the North.
The Vikings are setting sail to the New World once more.
Love it. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for today, and thanks for joining in on the show. We've got tomorrow Garth Sam with us, so ciao and bye for now.
Bye.